Good afternoon, students. So in this video, I'm still going to go over why science fiction is such a fun genre of literature to read. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and go over the many reasons why science fiction is fun. Today I want to take you on a journey to the far reaches of the universe, where we will explore the exciting world of science fiction. So what is science fiction, you may ask? At its core, science fiction is a genre that explores the intersection of science and human imagination. It takes us to worlds beyond our own, introduces us to creatures and technologies we would never have dreamed of, and challenges our understanding of what it means to be human. Why is science fiction important to teach? One important benefit of science fiction is that the settings and situations that the stories offer are unique and creative. Science fiction encourages our students' imaginations. Science fiction inspires students to think beyond the box and their own daily lives to the possibilities of what the future may hold. But why is science fiction so fun to explore? For one, science fiction offers us a way to escape our everyday lives and immerse ourselves in new and exciting worlds. We can explore the depths of space, journey to distant planets, and witness civilizations beyond our own. Science fiction also offers a unique perspective on our own world and our place within it. By examining futuristic societies and technologies, we can reflect on the issues facing our own society and ponder the direction we want to take as a human species. Furthermore, science fiction is full of adventure and excitement. From epic battles to daring expeditions, there's no shortage of action and suspense in the world of science fiction. And of course, let's not forget the incredible characters that populate these worlds, from heroic captains to intrepid explorers to cunning aliens. Science fiction is home to some of the most fascinating and unforgettable characters in literature. But perhaps the greatest appeal of science fiction is the way it challenges us to think and imagine beyond the boundaries of our current knowledge. By exploring what might be possible in the future, science fiction encourages us to dream big and strive for progress. It inspires us to push the boundaries of what we thought was possible and embrace new technologies and ideas that can help shape our future. Science fiction is a thrilling genre that offers us a glimpse into what might be possible in the future, while challenging us to think beyond the limits of our current knowledge. So whether you're a die-hard sci-fi fan or just looking for an exciting adventure, there's no doubt that science fiction has something to offer everyone. So grab a book, strap on your jetpack, and let's explore the final frontier together. In this video, I will go over Asian American science fiction and Hispanic science fiction. So let's start with Asian American science fiction. And so two Asian American authors that are quite important, Ted Chiang and Ken Liu. Now, in my last video, I talked about how Ken Liu translated Liu Shiqian's three-body problem. In this video, I'm going to talk about Ted Chiang, an Asian American author who has written many Asian American stories. And Ted Chiang's stories explore themes of cultural identity, immigration, and the intersection of technology and tradition. Ted Chiang's stories takes us on journeys to alternate realities where history has played out differently or where technology has changed the fabric of society. Ted Chiang's stories offer perspectives on what it means to be Asian American in the 21st century and challenges us to think about the role of cultural identity in shaping our world view. Ted Chiang's novella, Story of Your Life, was adapted into the film Arrival, which explores themes of identity, communication, and the nature of reality. In the movie Arrival, The story uses the concept of language and communication as a symbol of cultural differences and challenges of understanding and connecting with others. In this story, linguist Louise Banks is tasked with deciphering the language of an alien race that has landed on Earth. The alien's language is unlike any human language, and Louise must learn to think in a new way in order to understand it. Through her efforts to decode the alien language, she discovers that the aliens perceive time in a non-linear way, experiencing past, present, and future simultaneously. The image of language serves as a symbol of the cultural barriers that can separate us as humans from one another. Just as Louise must learn a new language in order to connect with the aliens, we humans must learn to communicate with each other and with other humans whose experiences and perspectives are different from our own. And so in Arrival, the movie, highlights the importance of empathy and understanding in building meaningful connections with others. In this movie, the concept of time and its relationship to identity and free will is another prominent theme in the movie Arrival. Through her encounter with the alien language, Louise experiences time in a new way, which allows her to see past, present, and future as a single continuous entity. This realization prompts her to reflect on her own life and the choices she has made, suggesting that the way we experience time shapes our sense of self and our understanding of the world. So the film adaptation of Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang also incorporates visual symbolism to reinforce these themes. The circular shape of the alien ships and the heptapod language itself are both suggestive of the idea of cyclical time and the interconnectedness of past, present, and future. The use of light and shadow in the film also reflects the idea that perception shapes reality and that our understanding of the world is shaped by the way we interpret our experiences. Overall, the symbolism present in Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang and Arrival, that's the same story, underscores the importance of empathy, communication, and understanding in building meaningful relationships with others. By exploring the complexities and intersection of language, time, and identity, Ted Chiang challenges readers and viewers to think their assumptions and consider new perspectives of the nature of reality and the human experience. And so in the movie, Louise Banks, the aliens tell Louise Banks that she's going to have a baby girl, and that she's going to have a wonderful time with that baby girl. But sadly, at the very end of that girl's life, that girl will die of a rare disease. And so when Louise finally does get married and has a baby, she already knows that her baby will have a rare disease. Yet, she still decides to go through with the pregnancy anyway. And so the aliens allow Louise Banks to experience her past, her present, and her future all at the same time. And that was the aliens' gift to Earth, was allowing Louise to understand the purpose of her life and to experience past, present, and future at the same time. Another interesting thing I found about the movie, I will stop share for a second. Another thing I found interesting about the movie was that Ted Chiang put a few Chinese symbolism into the movie. And so, for instance, Louise Banks happens to speak fluent Mandarin. So that's definitely the imprint of the Asian American author. Another imprint of the Asian American author is that Louise, in the movie, China is on the warpath. China wants to attack the aliens. And so the figure of China, I think, was played by General Chang or something like that. And yet, so China does not want to cooperate with the aliens. They see the aliens as a threat. And so Louise meets General Chang in the future. And then General Chang says to Louise, if it weren't for you, I would have attacked those aliens. But after you told me my wife's last words, that war makes widows, I decided not to attack the aliens and to make peace with them. And so the aliens showed Louise a future event in which the Chinese leader thanks Louise for averting war by telling him, in Chinese, by the way, in Mandarin, his wife's last words. And so Louise in the past is learning about Louise in the future. And so then Louise has to call the Chinese leader on his phone and then tell him his wife's last words. I know that sounds really convoluted, but past, present, and future are all intertwined together. And so the fact that Ted Chiang used Chinese and the Chinese leader and elements of Chinese into it and wove that into the symbolism of a very American story shows to me Ted Chiang's intersection of being Asian American. And so when you have an Asian American author, then you have more of a non-Western perspective on the story. If the story had been written by a non-Asian guy, you might necessarily not have the main character just be a linguist who happens to speak fluent Mandarin. And then at the end of the story, part of the peaceful ending is because China backs down. And so therefore, having all of this Chinese symbolism of peace, yin and yang, and balance within the story gives this story an Asian American feel to it. So this is my example of an Asian American story. And Ted Chiang also wrote a novel called Exhalation. Here, I'll show you the novel. I don't know if it shows. This is a really good novel you need to buy. So I will now go over some of the fun stories that's in Exhalation by Ted Chiang. It's a national bestseller. So I will go over it. So I will share my screen once again so that we'll go over Ted Chiang's Exhalation. So Exhalation is a collection of short stories by Ted Chiang, and there are several excellent stories to choose from. The first story is The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. This story follows the journey of a merchant who discovers a gateway that allows him to travel through time. He learns about the consequences of his actions and the value of cherishing the present moment. So yeah, I remember reading that story in Exhalation. Oops, let's see. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, if I put it in the middle. Yeah, so in this case, this guy goes to the marketplace, and then he finds a guy who has a kind of arc. And then when you walk through the arc, you travel 20 years to the future, and you stay in the same exact spot. And then you learn about what you look like and how you think 20 years from now. And so I like the idea of being able to travel into the future, and then you see your future self. How many of you have ever wondered if your future self could talk to your past self? What message would you give yourself? I remember in the movie Frequency, which is nothing to do with Ted Chiang, same thing, in which the future self tells the past self, invest in Google stocks, or something like that. And so the past self invested in Google stocks, and then in the future, he was rich, or something like that. So that wasn't in Ted Chiang's story, but it runs along the same trope of being able to travel into the future. And then what message would you give yourself if you could travel into the future and talk to your past self? So that is a fun science fiction trope that's used a lot, and Ted Chiang used it in his novel. Another one was Exhalation. In this story, a scientist discovers that the world he lives in is actually a complex machine, and he reflects on the nature of consciousness, memory, and mortality. And so basically, it's a world where robots live. And robots, there are no humans in the story. It's just a bunch of robots, and the whole planet are a bunch of robots. And then the robots think that they can live forever because they're made of machinery. All they have to do is just keep changing their body parts when the different body parts become rusted. And then they notice that the clocks seem to be going faster and faster, and that they're going slower and slower. And they thought at first the clocks were malfunctioning. Then they realized they themselves, their bodies, are slowing down. And that's how the robots realize through their breathing, okay, that they're breathing slower and slower, that they are slowly dying, that they are mortal, that they do have an expiration date. And so here Ted Chiang makes equivalent one, that the breathing equals your soul, equals your life. And that's very Chinese, because in Chinese, qi means breath. It also means your soul. It also means your life. And so Ted Chiang once again used Chinese symbolism in his science fiction stories to move the story along in a very different way than if a non-Western person had written it. So going on to the next one, okay. And so in the next story, The Life Cycle of Software Objects. This story explores the relationships between human and artificial intelligence as it follows the lives of two programmers who are tasked with raising and training digital pets called Digients. So in this story, Ted Chiang talks about two programmers who create these pet animals, digital pet animals, and then people could then buy the animal, and they make the pet animals look cute, and then people would pay money in order to buy a pet animal. That way you don't have to have a real animal that goes to the bathroom, for instance, on your good carpet. And so at first, everybody buys the pet animals. They were known as Digients. But then they were able to make the pet animals so real that the pet animals developed its own consciousness. And so I think that Ted Chiang then explores, what if you can make a robot that becomes sentient? What rights would those robots have? And a robot shouldn't just be deleted. His life should be worth something. And so Ted Chiang explores the intersection of what it is that makes us human and what it is that makes us conscious. And then what rights do we have as humans if something becomes conscious? And so therefore, what if AI became conscious? What rights would it have? And you realize that every living being has or deserves rights. I think that there was a episode on the Next Generation where Data, the android, they were going to take Data back for programming, and some scientists wanted to take Data apart just to see what his components look like. And Data did not want to be taken apart. Data said, "I'm a sentient being. Even though I'm an android, I'm still a sentient being, and I have rights. I am a man. I deserve rights." And so this kind of is reminiscent of the civil rights, where African American men marched with their protest signs that said, "I am a man. I don't want to be treated as subhuman." So I think that in that story with the Digients, it's like nothing should be treated as subhuman. And so that's what it is to make us human and civil rights in a science fiction. So this shows Ted Chiang's what it is to be Asian American. We Asian Americans are not the other. We are humans, just like everybody else. So once again, Ted Chiang brought in an Asian American angle to a science fiction story. And the same thing I actually like that episode where Data and Data won. At the very end, they had a trial, and Data, the judge then said, "Well, since you're a sentient being, you're human, therefore nobody can just take you apart because you have rights. You have to consent, just like anybody else, to having any medical procedure. If you don't consent, that's it." So that sort of thing. So that was one of my favorite science fiction. As you could tell, I'm a Trekkie. So let's get back to this, and I will go over some more. And the truth of fact, the truth of feeling. This story weaves together two parallel. All of these stories are written by Ted Chiang in his book. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, in the book Exhalation. So all of these stories appear in this book. Anyway, so the truth of fact, the truth of feeling. This story weaves together two parallel narratives. One about a man who discovers a technology that allows him to record every moment of his life, and another about a tribe in Africa that is introduced to written language for the first time. And so here, Ted Chiang puts into parallel and writes two different stories at the same time, where a African tribe learns written language, and so they're no longer in their oral tradition, because in the story the tribe is, they just tell the stories orally, and they didn't write it down. And so in that part of the story, the tribe is learning about or becoming literate for the first time. And then they're making this the same parallel as you have this device that can record every moment of your life. So there's no need to remember anything anymore. And you have to understand that in Chinese culture, it is so important to remember what came before, to have respect for your elders and remember the past. And not just, you don't just live for the present, but you have to give context to the present by respecting the elders and respecting what came before. And so that is the Asian edge to this particular story of always, if you just live in the present, which is very American, that's what Ted Chiang wants to warn you against, that technology makes it possible for us to just live in the present and forget about the past. And to me, the moral of the story is that you have to give context to the present by respecting your elders. When I say respecting your elders, that is remembering your traditions, remembering your customs, and remembering handing down family stories, and not just forget about it. And so that's what, to me, the whole Chinese tradition of remembering the past, of respecting the elders. So that is the non-Asian trope or non-Asian symbolism that Ted Chiang brings into this particular story. And so that's why I like reading Ted Chiang, because it's not obvious what his symbolism is, because Ted Chiang embeds his symbolism inside a very American story, and hence that is very Asian American, okay? As opposed to Chinese science fiction, where everything is about how technology and culture, how technology affects the culture of China, and then the intersection between technology and China, so that the science fiction story is located in China, such as the three-body problem. So that's the difference between Asian American and when you have a certain country. So Asian American versus Chinese. Anyway, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be about Hispanic American science fiction. So you have to know that in American science fiction, every single ethnic group has their own science fiction. And so you've got Asian American science fiction, Hispanic science fiction, African American science fiction, and then some, and more. So in this video, I just finished covering Asian American science fiction. So now I'm going to cover Hispanic American science fiction. So I based my Hispanic American science fiction from this book, Latinx Rising. And so in this book, it talks about the different kinds of science fiction that's in the book. So I will read to you, let's see if I could do this. So here you have Latinx is a collection of science fiction and fantasy stories written by U.S. Latino and Latinas. While there have been numerous anthologies of Latin American literature, this book focuses specifically on the confluence of science fiction and fantasy written by Latin Americans. So this collection is like an eclectic tape of Latin American stories. And so here you have many different kinds of Latin American stories, and it's got magical realism. It's got, let's see, and then my very favorite story is something called Caridad, and forgive my bad Spanish. Okay, so here, so let's see. As a rule of thumb, science fiction narratives are tied to the laws of natural science. And so basically, when you have science fiction, you usually don't have magic. In other words, things don't just happen in midair. And if it did, if you have that kind of magic and things just happen that's contrary to scientific law, that's known as fantasy. So that's how this particular author separates science fiction versus fantasy. And then he says that a lot of Latin American or Latin literature is associated with magic surrealism. And so, or magic realism. And he says that there's more to Latin literature than magic realism. And so he writes about, for better or worse, magic realism in which fantastical elements are included in the narrative in such a way that they seem unsurprising, then form the boundaries of Latinx literature for the general reading public. My experience is that too many writers have been pushed by academics, publishers, or financial reasons to write a magical realist style, even though it was not exactly what they wanted to write. In addition, it has been common among readers to categorize a story written by Latinx as magical realists when there is just a limit of something strange, or even when the story is flat out science fiction or fantasy. At its worst, this imposed magic realism as a way to relegate U.S. Latinos and Latinas to the realm of the irrational, the mythical, effectively cutting off the ability to engage science and technology. One or two of the stories in this anthology could be categorized as magical realist. However, the point is that there is a problem with magical realism as such, since it is a wonderfully rich genre with great political potential, but that magical realist stories should be joined to their brothers and sisters of fantasy and science fiction. Anyway, he means that just like a lot of Asian American authors are stereotyped to just write about only immigrant stories, and a lot of Asian American writers, they want to write other topics about other than just how they came to this country and how they assimilated to America as Asians. Similarly, Hispanic writers want to write stories besides just magic realism. They want to, just like everybody else, they want to expand their writing horizon and write about just hardcore, for instance, science fiction, and have no magical realism. Or if you're Asian American, not write about your immigration or coming to America or that sort of thing. And so all writers want to break beyond the stereotype of what you naturally assume that literature is supposed to be about. And so my favorite story from Latinx, so I'll just explain it off the top of my head because it's faster that way. So in this story, an 18-year-old, her family expects her to turn into a robot by the time she's 18. How do you make a person turn into a robot? Well, you place this headband, you implant some kind of robotic implant into her brain. And then this implant allows her to connect herself to the brains of all of the thoughts of her entire family. Can you imagine walking around and you know instantly what your cousin is thinking at any moment of the time, or what your aunt or your mother or father, all their thoughts come into your head, and you are connected. And then all the other family members connect themselves to you by wearing some kind of mental headband. And so the conflict in this story, Caridad, meaning I think it means career, is that this 18-year-old did not want to become a robot. She wanted to have her own life. She wanted her own happiness. She wanted to have her own path. But in this story, in this universe, the story's universe, every family would choose one child to become the family robot. So that way the robot could then earn the money. And in this particular story, it says that only those robots are able to get jobs because all other jobs have been outsourced to other countries. And so only somebody that has the brain power of their entire family can get a job, you see. And that's how hard it is to get a job in this. Anyway, the conflict in this story is, should she obey her family and become a robot, or should she follow her own path and not be a robot and just run away? And so if you decide to just follow your own path, that's very American. That's very individualistic. So that's the influence of the American culture. But in Hispanic culture, according to this story, you are obligated to follow what your family wants. Your life is dedicated to the interests and well-being of your entire family. Therefore, you are required to sacrifice yourself, and this is very Chinese. It's just like in a three-body solution, where each character would sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and not think about their own personal individuality. So in this way, Caridad is a story that focuses on, should I focus on my Hispanic heritage of being obligated to follow what my family wants, or do I take the American path of being individualistic, of following what I want and the pursuit of happiness? So I'll let you read the story to find out. And so the reason why I chose this story is that I myself have felt this conflict. Should I go the American way of individuality, or do I go by what my family wants? And so I myself have also experienced this. And so in Caridad, she has to decide which path to take. And so in Hispanic American stories, you have this conflict between whether you want to follow Hispanic way of life and honor those traditions, or you've become Americanized and you want to honor American traditions. So that's one of the stories that I really liked in this book. And there are other stories that I will talk about in a future video. But this is a really good book, and I will share my screen to discuss other, because I'm running out of time in this video, but in my next video I will go over even more stories from this book. This is a really good book. I think there was another story where the family is immigrating to the United States. Oh, no. The family was, okay, they're working at a factory. The father is working at a factory, and then the father gets an implant. Funny how all of these things have to do with implants. So he's part of an experiment, the father, part of an experiment where they implant you with this whatever, and then you get to experience, you get to dream whatever you want, wherever you want to be, and it's quite addictive once you get implanted. And it was a manufacturer who just wanted to make sure that the implant was safe for human use. So they asked these factory workers, and they would pay you extra if they would, volunteer to get themselves implanted. And so in this story, the father says, okay, I need the extra cash. So he got himself implanted. And in the implant allows you to dream whatever dream life you want. And you forget about your life, and you dream about being rich. You dream about being famous, whatever. But the problem with the implant is once you do it one time, dreaming, you want it more and more and more. You become addicted to it. You can't live without it. And so this represents the problem of drug addiction. I think that's what the author was trying to put in, the problem of drug addiction and that sort of thing. In when taking advantage of people who are poor and working. And then in the story, the son finds the implant because it is a gadget that you put onto your neck, so you could take it off, you see. And so the son, in the story, the son wants a bicycle. but the family's too poor to buy the bicycle. So as a result, the son accidentally finds the implant. He puts it on, and then in the dream, he dreams that he has the most beautiful bicycle in the entire neighborhood, and all the kids are so envious. And so this implant allows you to escape, and so that the father and the son become both addicted to this implant. And so this symbolizes the problem of the addiction to, say, alcohol, drugs, is very prominent in many communities where you have a lot of poor people. It doesn't have to be just Hispanic people. Poor people anywhere would get addicted to, it makes you more vulnerable when you're poor and when you have to work so hard, and then you have few opportunities to get out of your rut, or you feel like there's few opportunities to get out of your rut, and then the only way is through drinking and taking drugs to escape that reality. And so in this science fiction story, it's about the reality of addiction is a problem in many poor communities. And so in this story, it's the problem of addiction in many poor Hispanic communities. And so the book Latinx uses science fiction tropes to highlight social justice problems within the Hispanic community, and it also highlights what it's like to be Hispanic or American. So that was Caridad by, I have to look that up. Anyway, so I will now go to share my screen to talk more about this book. Let's see, share. Next we come to Hispanic American science fiction, which includes works by authors such as Junot Diaz, Carmen Maria Machado, and Daniel Jose Older. These, forgive my bad Spanish, these authors explore themes of cultural identity, immigration, and social justice, often set in alternate realities where Latinx culture is celebrated and amplified. They also offer unique perspectives on the challenges facing Hispanic Americans in the United States, and challenges us to think about what it means to be part of a marginalized community. Latinx Rising, once again, I'll show you the book. Let's see, does it go like this? So Latinx Rising, an anthology of Latinx science fiction and fantasy, is a 2020 anthology of science fiction and fantasy short stories by Latinx authors, edited by Matthew David Goodwin. The anthology features work by established and emerging writers such as Carmen Maria Machado, Silvia Morena Garcia, and Charles Yu. The stories in the anthology explore a wide range of themes, from immigration and identity to climate change and social justice. They also feature a diverse cast of characters, from queer superheroes to undocumented immigrants. Latinx Rising is a groundbreaking collection that showcases the vibrant and diverse voices of Latinx science fiction. The anthology is divided into 3 sections: past, present, and future. The past section features stories that explore the history of Latinx people in the Americas, from the pre-Columbian era to the present day. The present section features stories that deal with contemporary issues facing Latinx communities, such as immigration, gentrification, and police brutality. The future section features stories that imagine possible futures for Latinx people, from a world where they are the dominant culture to a world where they have achieved complete liberation. Latinx Rising is a powerful and important collection that will appeal to science fiction, fantasy, and Latinx literature, people of all ages. It is a must-read for anyone who wants to learn more about the rich and diverse culture of Latinx. Yeah, I just remembered one of the stories from the past section. I think that's like the very first story. Let's see if I can remember the name. So the very first story is about a bunch of immortals. Give me a second. I think it was The Road to Nyer by Kathleen Akala, Nyer. Anyway, so in that particular story, it talks about a bunch of immortals. So you have these aliens, Hispanic aliens, who live forever. Originally they came from another planet, settled in the United States. So they come from a planet in which everybody is Hispanic. And then they settled on Earth, and then they try very hard to hide the fact that they're immortal. And so then a couple of descendants, tourists, they go and visit. So basically the outset of the story, a couple of Hispanic tourists, they go visit an old Hispanic castle. And then they come to realize that they are the descendants of immortal Hispanics from another planet. That's a pretty cool concept. And that their ancestors from hundreds of years ago, usually when you visit those old castles and you see those portraits, obviously those people have passed away. But in this story, the people in those portraits are still alive. So that's what makes it science fiction and fun. So here you have a short history, and by using science fiction, they go through a short history of Hispanic people on Earth. It's a great way of getting everyone interested in history by turning it into a science fiction story. And anyway, so that's the end of this particular. I will go over this book some more at the beginning of my next video, where I will go over in much more detail. I used up too much of my time talking about Asian American, so that I ran out of time for Hispanic American literature. So that means at the top of my next video, that's what I'll be spending more time on that topic, and then I'll probably run out of time for the next group, which would be African American after Hispanic American. But anyway, that's the way it goes. So I hope you liked my introduction to science fiction, introduction to what is science fiction, an introduction to why American science fiction is so much fun to read, especially if you read the different groups of African American science fiction, Asian American science fiction, and Latinx science fiction. And yes, there are some science fiction writers who are against the labeling of different science fiction stories into different ethnic groups. But it does make it easier for me to teach and appreciate the different genres. So to me, that's the caveat. So see you next time, and I hope that you keep reading science fiction, and I will bring back this book, and I will have a much more complete analysis. So think of this as a kind of appetizer, of this book. And yes, I finished going over, this book, which was Asian American science fiction. So you can get these books at Amazon. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. So have a great day.